Hello, everyone. This is Bill Richard. I'm the Data and Analytics Practice Manager for Spyglass. Today, we're going to talk about the differences between Data Factory and Synapse Analytics, which is often of a lot of confusion in the Azure data space. Jumping right into it, Synapse Analytics is essentially the blend of many services on Azure, inclusive of Data Factory capabilities, SQL Data Warehouse, also known as the dedicated pool these days, Data Lake Storage, Apache Spark, SQL Serverless, Data Explorer pools, and more, wrapped into a nice little bow that they call the Synapse Analytics Workspace. It also provides security in Synapse role-based access control, integration with Azure Machine Learning, integration with Power BI and Azure Purview, management and monitoring capabilities within the workspace and the studio itself. Some of the core feature parities between ADF and Synapse Analytics. You can deploy and execute SSIS integration runtimes and SSIS packages, both within Azure Data Factory and Synapse Analytics. One thing that Data Factory has a leg up on is you can't do cross-region integration of data flows, which means executing data flows in different regions than your Synapse Analytics workspace would actually be present in. And you cannot share runtimes across Synapse Analytics workspaces where you can share them within Azure Data Factory. There is no component of Power Query within Synapse Analytics, which is, in our experience, a less common skill set and tool set leveraged within Data Factory. They both provide a host of knowledge centers and solution templates. They both have native Git integration so that you can manage source control and do continuous integration of your pipelines. And then where Synapse starts to take over as a superset of Data Factory capabilities, you can monitor your Spark jobs for both data flows and Apache Spark pools. Within Synapse Analytics, there is a SQL dedicated pool, there is a SQL serverless pool, there is an Apache Spark, both data flows and Spark pool notebook integration that you can take advantage of. And then there's also Data Explorer, which is in public preview. Data Factory can integrate with all these services, but these are not built into what Data Factory is as a solution. Taking a quick look at the view of some of the differences between Data Factory and Synapse, you may notice that Synapse Workspace and Synapse Studio specifically has a very similar look and feel to what Data Factory Studio is. Yet there are less options on the left navigation in Data Factory compared to Synapse Analytics, and that's due to the blend of many services. So within Synapse, you have home. This is where your knowledge base can be found. You have data, where you can, in real time, navigate into your data lake file system, interact with SQL services. If you have a SQL database on here or a lake database, you can create integration data sets. You can develop SQL scripts, KQL scripts on Data Explorer or notebooks, which are code-based Spark notebooks, either Python, Scala, C#, Spark SQL, or even support for R within the Spark platform. You have pipeline capabilities, which are the equivalent of your Data Factory capabilities. You can monitor everything within the workspace. You can monitor your pipeline runs, similar to what you'll see in Data Factory. You can also monitor your SQL pools, the SQL requests that are happening on the SQL pools, the Apache Spark applications, whether it's notebook or data flows that are leveraging Spark behind the scenes. And then you can also manage your workspace. Both access control, credentials, workspace libraries that are attached to Spark, Git configuration, SQL pools, or otherwise. Data Factory, being a subset of services that has been integrated into Synapse Analytics Workspace, has less menu options than you will find in Synapse Analytics. You have your Home tab, which is, again, where you have your knowledge base. You have some quick little wizards to allow you to ingest data quickly and orchestrate and build pipelines. You can skip straight to Author, which has purely the pipeline capabilities that you found within the Synapse Workspace that allow you to orchestrate data transformation steps as part of your data processing workflows. You also have one additional component down here called Power Query, which is not available in Synapse Analytics. And then within Monitor, you have a lot less things that you have to monitor within Data Factory. You are only monitoring your data processing pipelines within Data Factory, or within Synapse, you are monitoring everything within the workspace, inclusive of SQL dedicated pools, Apache Spark applications, so on and so forth. You can still manage integrations or lake services, integration runtimes, and Git configuration within Data Factory, but Data Factory also has less role-based access controls than you will find within a Synapse workspace, where you can grant a whole bunch of different access controls based on the persona or the role and responsibilities tied to that group. So the next question, naturally, is when do you use ADF? There is still a place for Azure Data Factory. Some of the common things are when you're not landing data in a data lake or a data warehouse, dedicated pool, or anything that you find within a Synapse workspace. You're using it purely for data integration scenarios. Maybe you're landing it into Snowflake, maybe you're landing it into an on-prem Oracle warehouse or something else. Data Factory could be a good fit. You do not need all of those other services. Not that you have to use those services as part of a Synapse workspace. You could accomplish both using either a Synapse workspace or Data Factory and just ignore the other capabilities of a Synapse workspace until a future date. That flows into when you're just in need of an ETL tool. As I already noted, when you're landing it in things that are not within a Synapse workspace, typically when you want to move SSIS workloads and just lift and shift them into Azure, Data Factory was the best place to go for that because it's a simpler architecture than a Synapse workspace. But as things have evolved, I would say I would have no quarrels moving those directly into Synapse as an SSIS process. If the workload's specific to a product group, so say your data science team has machine learning and they just want to easily get data into their environment, then provisioning them a data factory instance so they can do a simple copy of data from SQL into their storage and then build their machine learning processes on them is a good fit for ADF. There's no reason a machine learning or a data science team needs an entire Synapse workspace. When ADF is leveraged as an integration platform, maybe for just a single application, and there's no need for all of the other components in Synapse workspace, you're going to use Data Factory just to support the integration needs of a specific app, and the lifecycle of that Data Factory is tied to that application. And for those who like Power Query, which is a familiar tool set for those who work in Excel or have worked in Power BI over the years, you really want to do Power Query integration activities, you could do that through Data Factory instead of Power BI. To summarize, Synapse pipelines, the ability to ingest, prepare, transform, predict and enrich, and integrate with things like the Synapse pool is essentially the equivalent of what Azure Data Factory is. Everything else within the Synapse workspace, all of the capabilities that you find beyond this, including the management, security, monitoring, the Metastore, the SQL engine, the Spark engine, dedicated SQL, serverless SQL, and a host of different languages to take to your advantage, are not found within Azure Data Factory. Hopefully that clarifies and gives you some guidance on when to use ADF and the differences between Azure Data Factory and Synapse Analytics.